Okay, everyone, it's Brant again, your CT310T, and I'm going to be going over Lab 4 with you all real quick. This lab's just going to be a quick overview of some basic CSS. It won't take too long. I just want to give you guys some knowledge about CSS so then you can go out and start actually doing some more styling even beyond what you did with your home pages last week. So, on the lecture on Monday, we talked about CSS and how we use it to style and define the way that a web page would be displayed. Um, if you're looking for more info on CSS, you can always go to this W3 Schools page, and they have everything you could possibly know or need to know about formatting all sorts of different things. They have examples. You can interact with these examples and actually change the properties yourself. So I could change this to square, just like this, because I can't type. Change it in here. If you want to do that, that's fun to play around with. It's a good way of referencing stuff, and we will also talk about the inspect function. I'm using Chrome as my browser today, so I will be talking about inspect in Chrome, but it is available in other browsers. It's just slightly different. So for this example, we're going to, let me reload this real quick. So here's our recipe page without any styling applied to it. And we're not going to match the exact styling, but here's an example of it with some styling applied to it. So the HTML between this page and this page is exactly the same, but what has changed is the CSS. So stuff like these boxes and font colors, centering, everything. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to show you the HTML. I already have it open. And in here you can see that I've linked in a style sheet called styles.css. And so that is for this page right here, which is the one we will be working with today. So generally, when you're styling a page, the first thing you usually put in there is your font family. And so I'm just going to use this Arial, Helvetica, and Sans Serif. You can see the font I think will change when we load this. Yeah. And you always want to specify the fonts that you're going to use, and it's a good idea to put them in body because body will cascade down to all the elements within it. So you can see with our page, if we close this body tag, that's where a lot of our stuff is going to be. This footer is outside of body for some reason. I don't know why. I personally would put it inside, but it's okay because now the footer, right, these fonts aren't going to match these other fonts, which is not desirable. So in addition, you can do background colors. So let's say I wanted to make this Alice blue. So now the entire body of the page, so the entire background is changed to blue. That's kind of a hard color. If you have issues seeing colors, this is not easy to see. So let me go in here. This is what I'm doing. This is another thing I wanted to show you all is with Google Chrome, you have this inspect. And this is really, really useful. So you right click, you go to inspect, and it brings up this thing, and here's the HTML code for my web page. And here is actually the styling associated with it. So if I click on this body element, you can see those font families and background colors that we specified here are right over here. And now I can even enable and disable it, so now I can switch between the two and see it. And I can even choose a more dramatic color, like this shade of blue. Maybe will be easier for some people to see. And now enable, disable, you can see that that background color changes the background of the body. You can also, as you've seen earlier, you can change this to these properties. It's not going to affect that. So when I change this here, you can see that this file doesn't change, but it gives you an opportunity to play around with different things before you actually make any changes. And in that way, you're able to kind of make more informed decisions about the colors you want. So I actually prefer dark gray to that Alice blue. So I'm going to do that. Another thing to note is by clicking on this square, you can actually change and specify a color. And then it'll give you the hex code for the color. And what a hex code is that this hex code shows you basically the R, G, and B values for it. And the R is the red, the G is the green, and B is blue. And this is in hex code. It's not in decimal. So these actually range from 0 to 255. So if we were to go all the way to white, it's all the way F. So 255, 255. And all the way black should be all the way 0. So you can kind of see white, black are opposites. F is the maximum value in hex code, and 0 is the minimum. And then if we go all the way red, you can see FF 0000. We go to blue. There's a way for us to get perfect blue. Here, I'll change it here. If we go all the way blue, you can see it's 0000FF. And if we go all the way green, you can see it is 0FF0. So that's a good way of understanding that these colors can actually be specified with these numerical values. And then if I like a color like this, I can copy it and I can just paste it in here with the pound sign. And so that's the color that will stay there. If I'm having a trouble time picking colors, you can also use a CSS color picker, or you can look for color scheme. Let's see if this helps us at all. So there's tools that help you pick out different colors. Here's a palette of colors. There's a different tool that's really nice. Oh, there it is. Go forward. Sorry, everyone. Colorcoolers.co. It says it's super fast. It actually takes a second to load. This one I use a lot. I think this is so cool. Once it finishes loading, I can show you. So with this, you get a color palette, and then you can hit spacebar, and it generates a bunch of different ones. If you like a color, say I like this color, you can then generate some more, and then you can just copy those color codes straight into your CSS, and now the background of my page will be that color. There we go. It's really cool. So that's how you do background colors, everything about colors, a little bit about inspect. So fonts. The other thing is the notion of selecting stuff. So in here we can see here's our HTML. We have this header element, and let's say we wanted to style this h1 tag. We could style it by selecting h1 and doing that, right? Let's say font size equals 20. But then that's going to affect all the h1 tags. Luckily, all these ones are h3, so it doesn't matter. But if you were to have several h1 tags and you only wanted to select a specific one, this isn't going to work for you. So what you can do is you can do header and then h1. What this says is all h1 tags that are descendants of header tags. So basically any h1 inside of header is going to get this styling attributes. So if I wanted to make this a dark gray color, I use colors a lot because they're easy to see, and because it's one property, I know I'm not going to mess up. But I'm only selecting this one header. That is a very not great color. Let's try that. Okay, cool. So I'm selecting just this h1 element within header, and that's a really useful thing to know. Like, let's say I just wanted to select h3 inside of div. Div's not very good because there's so many divs. Okay. What else is there in this lab? Okay. Selecting within other elements, background colors, text shadow. This text shadow is wrong, by the way. I'll show you real quick how to do it. So if I wanted to do text shadow on the header, let's say, first of all, there should only be 2 of these. There should be no commas, and let's say I wanted to just do blue. Okay, so now this should work. Yeah. So what this does is, I think this is left right and this is up down. So if I do an inspect on this h1 tag, right, and I go in here, this is another cool thing. I can adjust these. So you can see I'm moving it, the blue shadow to the right, or I move it to the left. And then this other one is up down, so I can move it down or up. So First one is left right, the second one is up down. Okay. Now to talk about classes and IDs. So you can see this div has the class contents. Now what that means is that we can select that in here using contents, dot contents. And that's useful because now if we created another div, let's say that we wanted to have the same styling. So real quick, let's say that we want all our things in contents. Again, I'm going to use colors because they're easy. We want them to have gray backgrounds. And we want the text to be red. Or, sorry, not text, color. So now, everything in here, gray background and red, right? Let's say I didn't want to have to rewrite these properties. I wanted another element with the same ones. Let's say this other div is a hello world, horizontal rule, or something. There we go. I reloaded. Okay. So I want this to have the same styling as this, but I don't want to have to retype all these rules. I can just go ahead and go to this div and assign it the class contents. And now, when I reload this, it has the same styling as this. And the cool part about these classes is if you created another class, let's say text styles, and this one, text decoration, let's do underline, for example. Now I want this class to have all the styles that this other contents does, but I also want to have the text decoration. I can just add this other class in. So now this belongs to these two classes. So now this one will get hopefully the underline properties that I just specified. If everything was done. Oh, it's called text styles, not text decoration. So it's in the contents class and the text styles class. So now it's underlined. It's kind of hard to see because red on gray is not great contrast, but you should kind of get the point just from that. So it's really useful to have that. Delete that. So moving on. The other thing is there's a such thing as ID. So you can see this ingredients tag. An ID is different than class in that it should only belong to one element. And what this allows us to do is several things. Like let's say we had a link. We could link, all right, let's actually link to instructions. So you can see down here we have this instructions thing. And I'll put this up in the header. So, okay. So I'm reloading. Hopefully I did not just break everything. Okay. So obviously this is not laid out very well. That's okay. We'll put a line break real quick. Well, anyways, so I have this link, and it points to my hashtag instructions, my instructions ID. Now when I click on this, it'll take me down to the instructions. Let me get rid of this styling, red color, and just get rid of all of this. And so it allows us to click and jump to that. We can also use the ID later on when we're doing JavaScript. Let's say I wanted to be able to, like if I was going to make a button that was making these instructions appear and disappear, I'm just going to show you a little JavaScript right now to demonstrate, but it's not really vital that you know this. There's like JavaScript that lets us get an element by ID, so we want to get the instructions element by its ID instructions. Set that to a variable. You can see there's our instructions div, right, that we had, and we want to, like, let's say hide this, right? Oh, here we go. Style.display, and set this to none. So when I execute this line of code, it's going to hide all these instructions. So we could have a button that expands and unexpands the instructions, which would be cool. So now I can go back to display block or whatever. Display none. Display block. So every time it gets clicked on, it does whatever line of code, hide and unhide that. But that wouldn't work if we were using a class, right? Because, I mean, I think it would work. I'm not sure if it even has a thing, such thing as element by class name, okay. So contents. We could do the same thing, right? Display none. Well, it doesn't work for some reason, but that's because there's several elements with that. But anyways, you can do it by class and by ID, but ID allows you to select a specific thing in the page, and that's why it's really useful. And you can also do this link thing to jump to it if you're doing a one-page design. Cool. So there's really not much else to say about. I just kind of wanted to give you basic CSS properties. That you can color text, font is important. I think I explained that with fonts, this might have been in an earlier video, but also with fonts, they appear in the order that you do. So the reason you do 3 of them is because, like, if the browser doesn't have Arial, then it's going to try and use Helvetica. And if it doesn't have Helvetica, then it's going to try and use sans serif. And so that way you can specify several fonts, and then you have backup options. So yeah, so we went over colors, we went over this inspect, which I think is really useful. Something worth playing around with, right? You can do all sorts of stuff with this. It's really useful to use. And we talked about a little bit about text shadow, I guess, and more importantly, we talked about class and ID, which is something that's an important concept coming up later. And I don't know if I showed you this before we go. You can select a thing by ID. So like if you wanted to style in just the ingredients, you could select them by ID and change their background color, for example. And now you have that. So it's useful. You can select specific elements by ID in CSS. You can select them by ID in JavaScript. You can select them by ID in links. Now, class is better for just applying styling attributes to several different areas of your web page so that you kind of have a uniform experience. And that way, like if you're writing several pages, let's say, and they are all going to have like a main div, you can all give them the same class, and then you don't have to copy and paste styles over because you've already written the styles for, dot contents one time, and then everything that is a dot contents class will get those styles. All right. Thank you all for watching today, and I will see you in Lab Thursday.